Now, who would agree it would be a really bad idea to get drunk before you make any of your decisions? Yet that's what most people do every single day. They allow their emotions to govern their perspective of how they make their decisions. Let's look at this in a different way. Has anyone here ever had someone get you so excited that they were able to take advantage of you? And as a result, they took advantage of you because you didn't see any downside in their proposition whatsoever. Has anyone here ever been offered an opportunity, but you were so pessimistic, you were so skeptical that you didn't think about any of the possible upside, and so you didn't take advantage of it, only to find out later that you missed out on a really, really good opportunity? Emotions not only intoxicate you, but they filter your perspective. And who would agree, in order to make the best possible decisions available, you need to get as much information as you possibly can. And the best way for you to get as much information as you possibly can is to remain neutral. When you live here, guess what you see? Everything. When you live here, you see maybe 50% of it. When you live here, you maybe see the other 50% of it. When you look at the top players in the world, consistently, they're neutral. And when do they lose their game? When emotion creeps in. Emotions and chaos go hand in hand. And if you've got high levels of emotion in your life, I can pretty much guarantee that you have probably a disproportionate level of chaos in your life as well. And if you're looking to remove the chaos from your life, the first thing you need to do is you need to neutralize it. How? You need to learn how to regulate your emotional system. Now, unfortunately for a lot of us, myself included, I was never shown how to regulate my emotional system. I never had a paternal or a maternal figure that knew how to regulate properly. In fact, my example was of someone that was completely unregulated. And so as a result, I never learned how to regulate properly as a child. I didn't learn how to regulate properly until my mid-30s. Why do you think it's so difficult to be able to regulate emotions and do this consciously? Because just like alcohol, guess what? And alcohol and drugs and barbiturates, guess what emotions are? Emotions are addictive. And when I flood a cell with emotion, so the triangles are sadness, the squares are happiness, and I flood that cell with emotions, I'm constantly flooding that cell with sad peptides, sad peptides, sad peptides. What do cells constantly do? They replicate, they split, and they divide, but they also evolve to the environment. Peptides are a protein. They're a food source for a cell. And so emotions provide energy to cells. And so if you've trained your body to consume emotional energy, then your body is going to become addicted to consuming emotional energy. Guess what peptides are to a cell? Emotional peptides. They're a fuel source. They're a protein. And so when that cell splits and divides, if I've been bombarding that cell with sadness, what is that cell going to evolve to be more adaptable to? It's going to be more adaptable to sadness. So rather than having 3 receptors for sadness, guess what? Now it's going to have 4. Why? Because it's adapting to its environment. And that's what we do. We are constantly evolving and adapting to our environment. And so when those cells get hungry, guess what they're going to do? Those cells will literally work together, collaborate together like a conductor to orchestrate an event for an emotion to be triggered so that they can get fed. And so what we've got to understand, emotions are just as addictive as drugs. They work on the exact same receptors. Your cells will adapt to the environment. Okay, so if they're used to getting lots of sadness, your cells will crave sadness. If you're used to getting lots of happiness, your cells will crave happiness. And when they start getting depleted of those peptides, you'll start to feel weird. You'll actually go into what's called an emotional detox, much like you would if you were going into a drug detox. Most people are used to feeling sad, and when they don't feel sad, they go, no, this doesn't feel right, because sad, in most cases, angry, in some cases, becomes their baseline. And the moment they feel anything other than what their baseline is, they go, oh, something's not quite right. When you have an experience, and your body releases the combination of neuropeptides, it goes down through the bloodstream into the body, and they connect with every single cell in your body, guess what those cells do? The moment the receptor goes and clicks in, guess what the cell does? It changes in its oscillation rate. It is a bandwidth of frequency. It's either going to vibrate at a higher rate of frequency or it's going to vibrate at a lower rate of frequency. That's it. It's just a bandwidth. It's either going to vibrate faster or it's going to vibrate slower. And depending on its frequency of oscillation will determine the context of the emotion. Now, what do you think is the context for high vibration? Have you ever noticed when someone's happy or really excited, they move really quickly and they talk really fast? Have you ever noticed that? Have you ever seen a kid that's really excited? They move really quickly and they talk really fast. Now, on a lower vibration, has anyone ever noticed that when people are sad, in most cases, they move a little slower? What you're seeing is an external representation of what's going on internally at a cellular, molecular level. But there's also an impact when it comes to the physical aspects of the domain that you're in. Just like any form of energy, all energy is governed by a polarity, where there's a positive and there's a negative. And when you take a positive and a negative and you put them together, what do? They attract one another. And so when you choose to oscillate at a high frequency of emotion, you start vibrating at a high rate of frequency, guess what form of energy you are in overproduction of? Positive. And I don't mean that in the term of positive psychology. I mean that in the terms of negative and positive physical polar opposites. When you're experiencing a lower rate of vibration, guess what your body is producing more of? Lower negative vibrations. And it's purely based on the oscillation rate and the rate of vibration. So when you're vibrating at a high rate of frequency and you're emanating a high rate of positive frequency, guess what you're going to become a magnet for? Now, let's just battle test this for a second. I could be full of shit here. But has anyone ever noticed that when you're really excited and you're really happy, that oftentimes someone will just come and piss on your parade? But it's not always people. Sometimes it's the perspective. Has anyone ever been really excited before and all of a sudden you start thinking about everything that could possibly go wrong? Has anyone ever been really excited before and it wasn't a person or a perspective, but something happened out of the blue, an event which appeared completely random, and it pulled you out of that positive energy? There's no accidents here. The universe is constantly seeking balance. And what this looks like in the context of emotion, in most cases, it looks a little bit bipolar, where people swing backwards and forwards, back. Because does anyone notice when you're really excited, sometimes someone will come and say something or piss on your parade. Sometimes you'll just all of a sudden get sad. Sometimes an event will happen. You'll be like, oh. Now, what is the universe's goal by sending you that charge? Neutralize, to send you to the middle. But guess what kicks into overdrive? Your fucking ego, driven by your psychology, goes, oh my God, the world's going to end. So you don't go to neutral. That's what the universe's goal was. You go screaming past neutral down into fucking negative territory. All of a sudden you're down, someone tries to pick you up, or you're down and you go, well, hang on, what's the benefit of this? When the universe sends you that positive charge, what's the goal of the universe? What is the goal of physics? Balance. When you're aware of the emotional impacts of your psychology, because what do you think will trigger your emotions? It's the story that you create around the meaning of the situation. But here's what you've got to understand. Everything is constantly in balance. And if you don't think it is, then the only thing that's out of balance is your perspective. And your job is to balance your perspective. Because when you can balance your perspective, your emotions, as a natural consequence, balance themselves. So when you're in a heightened state of emotion, when you're really excited, what type of questions should you ask yourself in order to neutralize? I'm very grateful that things are good, but what's the drawback of this? What's the downside of this? And I'm not trying to get you to become depressed. What I'm trying to get you to become is neutral. And when things appear sad or depressive or you're angry, you start asking the question, what's the benefit of this? What's the drawback? What's the benefit? Because here's what I know. The more I play here, the easier life is, the less suffering I have. Your ability to neutralize your emotions will come down to how aware you are. What are the stories that I tell myself on a regular basis that trigger these things? And you start to recognize there's a pattern there. There's a pattern of certain stories make you feel a certain way. And you start to go, oh shit. If I tell myself this, I always feel sad. Well, why would I want to feel sad? Because that's what feels normal. That's your baseline. But when you can start to catch it, you can start to change the story and you can start to neutralize. Yes, it might feel a little boring at first. Yes, it's very unexciting at first. But then once you start to get a new baseline, you start to realize this is actually a really powerful space to play.